What would you do if helping a stranger cost you everything you had left, but that stranger turned out to hold the key to changing your entire life? The blizzard tears through downtown Detroit like nature's own fury. Snow whips sideways, turning the world into a blur of white chaos. In the middle of this frozen nightmare, a man kneels beside a luxury Mercedes, his bare hands working frantically on the engine. Jerome Washington doesn't know it yet, but the next 45 minutes will cost him his last job interview, his father's precious tools, and nearly his life. The woman shivering in the driver's seat? She's watching every move he makes with growing amazement. But here's what Jerome doesn't know. This woman isn't just any stranded driver. She's about to become the most important person in his life. And when she discovers what he sacrificed to help her, she'll move heaven and earth to find him again. Because sometimes, the people we help in our darkest moments are exactly the ones with the power to bring us into the light. Jerome had no idea that this ordinary Tuesday would be the last day of his old life. 5:47 a.m. The abandoned warehouse on Detroit's east side is silent, except for the sound of Jerome Washington carefully folding his cardboard bedding. 3 months he's called this place home. 3 months since the medical bills from his mother's cancer treatment ate through his savings. 3 months since he lost the apartment they shared. He moves with quiet dignity through his morning routine, wash his face with bottled water, smooth out his one clean button-down shirt, check his father's tool bag, the leather worn soft from decades of use, the tools inside worth more than most people's rent. These tools are all he has left of his old life. When everything else got repossessed, sold, or lost, Jerome couldn't bring himself to part with them. A man's tools are his identity, his father used to say. Take care of them and they'll take care of you. Walking through Detroit's financial district, Jerome practices interview answers in his head. Why the employment gap, Mr. Washington? He's rehearsed this 100 times. How do you explain that watching your mother die broke something inside you? That grief made you miss work, miss rent, miss everything that mattered? The truth is too complicated for a job interview. I was caring for my sick mother, he'll say. Clean, simple. It doesn't capture the sleepless nights, the hospital bills, the moment he held her hand as she passed. But it's all a potential employer needs to know. Jerome knows every free Wi-Fi spot in the city. The library opens at 9 a.m. He'll update his resume there, apply for positions, keep pretending he has a permanent address. The trick is looking employable when you sleep on cardboard. Stay clean. Stay hopeful. Never let them see the desperation. Downtown, business people rush past in expensive coats. Jerome watches them through coffee shop windows, remembering when he was one of them. 5 years at Ford Motor Company as an automotive engineer. Good salary, nice apartment, a future that made sense. That life feels like it belonged to someone else now. But Jerome doesn't let bitterness take root. When an elderly woman struggles with icy steps, he offers his arm. When a mother can't manage groceries and a stroller, he helps carry bags. His pockets hold tissues for crying strangers, quarters for parking meters about to expire. Kindness costs nothing, his mother always said, but it's worth everything. The weight of invisible homelessness presses down daily. People see his clean appearance and assume he's employed. They don't know he spent last night shivering in a warehouse, that he's down to his last $3, that today's interview might be his final chance before winter truly sets in. Jerome's stomach growls, but he saves his money for the bus fare to today's interview. Better to arrive hungry than not arrive at all. He's learned to time his walks past restaurants around closing time, when managers sometimes offer leftover food to anyone willing to take it. At the library, Jerome settles at a computer terminal. His LinkedIn profile still shows him as employed. Maintaining the fiction helps with job searches. His credentials look impressive on screen. Michigan State University engineering degree, 5 years of automotive experience, glowing recommendations. On paper, Jerome Washington is exactly the kind of employee companies want. The reality is more complicated. 3 months of homelessness shows in ways photographs can't capture. The constant stress of uncertainty. The exhaustion from never truly resting. The way hope gets a little harder to maintain each day. But today feels different. Today, Jerome has an interview at Morrison Automotive Supply at 4 p.m. It's not engineering work, just basic automotive repair, but it's a foot in the door. A chance to prove himself again. A pathway back to stability. Jerome prints out directions to the interview location. The address is downtown, not far from the Renaissance Center. He's walked past that gleaming tower hundreds of times, watching successful people disappear into its marble lobby. Sometimes he wonders what it would feel like to belong in a place like that again. His father's tool bag sits beside him, leather soft with age. Inside, precision instruments worth thousands of dollars, wrenches, gauges, specialty parts for automotive work. These tools built his father's reputation as the best mechanic in their neighborhood. They put Jerome through engineering school. They represent generations of skilled work, of taking pride in craftsmanship. Jerome has been offered good money for the tools, enough to rent a room for months. But selling them would mean giving up on the dream of working again, of being the man his father raised him to be. As long as he has these tools, he's still Jerome Washington, automotive engineer. Without them, he's just another homeless person asking for spare change. The library's warmth wraps around him like a temporary embrace. For a few hours, he can pretend he belongs here among the books and computers, the students and professionals. Nobody questions his right to be here. Nobody asks where he slept last night. At 2 p.m., Jerome begins his journey to the interview. The bus fare takes most of his remaining money, but this job could change everything. Morrison Automotive Supply needs someone who understands engines, someone reliable. Jerome can be that person. He just needs one chance to prove it. Walking toward downtown, Jerome doesn't notice the dark clouds gathering overhead. He doesn't check the weather forecast warning of an unprecedented blizzard heading toward Detroit. He's focused entirely on the interview that could save his life. He has no idea that in 2 hours he'll face a choice that will test everything he believes about kindness, sacrifice, and doing what's right. A choice that will cost him this interview, these precious tools, and nearly his life. But sometimes, losing everything is the first step toward finding something better. But as the storm intensified, Jerome heard something that would test every moral choice he'd ever made. By 2 p.m., the sky over Detroit had turned an ominous gray-black. Weather reports called it a historic blizzard, but Jerome hadn't seen the warnings. He was too focused on his 4 p.m. interview, too busy rehearsing answers to notice the wind picking up outside the library. The first snowflakes began falling as Jerome stepped onto the bus. Light, innocent flakes that seemed harmless enough, but by the time he reached downtown, those innocent flakes had transformed into something menacing. The wind howled between buildings, turning the snow sideways, cutting visibility to almost nothing. Jerome pulled his thin jacket tighter. This wasn't the light dusting the morning forecast had predicted. This was serious weather, the kind that shut down cities and trapped people indoors. But he couldn't turn back now. Morrison Automotive Supply was just 6 blocks away. His future depended on making it to that interview. The streets emptied quickly as the storm intensified. Smart people were heading home, seeking shelter, calling it a day. Jerome pressed forward against the wind, his interview folder tucked protectively inside his jacket. Each step was a battle against the elements, but he'd fought bigger battles than this. Then he heard it. "Help! Someone please help!" The voice cut through the howling wind, desperate and scared. Jerome squinted through the swirling snow, trying to locate the source. There, about 50 yards ahead, a figure stood beside a car in the middle of the intersection, one of Detroit's busiest crossroads, now turned treacherous by the storm. A woman in an expensive camel-colored coat waved frantically at passing cars. Her Mercedes sat dead in the road, steam rising from under the hood. She was clearly out of place in this neighborhood, her designer heels slipping on the rapidly accumulating ice, her perfectly styled hair whipping in the brutal wind. Jerome checked his watch. 3:15 p.m. If he stopped to help, he'd miss his interview. There was no question about that. The job site was still 20 minutes away in good weather. In this blizzard, with this detour, he'd never make it by 4 p.m. Car after car swerved around the broken-down Mercedes, drivers honking angrily but never stopping. The woman tried to flag them down, but everyone was too focused on getting to safety. She pulled out her phone, but Jerome could see her frustration as the call failed, probably no signal in the storm. The temperature was dropping by the minute. Weather like this could kill someone. The woman's expensive coat wouldn't protect her much longer, and her car was blocking traffic in increasingly dangerous conditions. Every minute she stood there, the situation became more perilous. Jerome watched from his doorway across the street, torn between self-preservation and conscience. This was his shot, his one real opportunity in months. Morrison Automotive had been clear about the interview time, 4 p.m. sharp. In the corporate world, showing up late was showing up unprepared. They wouldn't care about weather, about helping strangers, about moral choices. They'd just see someone who couldn't manage to arrive on time. The woman stumbled slightly as another gust of wind nearly knocked her over. She was getting weaker, probably getting hypothermic. Jerome could see her breath coming in short, panicked puffs. This wasn't just about car trouble anymore. This was about human survival. A police car drove past without stopping, probably racing to handle other storm-related emergencies. The woman tried to wave it down, but the officers didn't see her through the blinding snow. She was truly alone out there, growing more desperate by the minute. Jerome felt his father's voice in his head. "Son, we help because it's right, not because it's convenient." But this wasn't just inconvenient. This was devastating. This was the difference between rebuilding his life and remaining homeless through Detroit's brutal winter. This was everything he'd worked toward for 3 months, balanced against the welfare of a complete stranger. The woman looked directly at him across the street. Even through the snow, he could see the fear in her eyes. She was scared, cold, and running out of options. Her expensive car suggested she probably had people who cared about her, people who would want someone to stop and help if she were in danger. Jerome thought about his mother, about all the strangers who had shown kindness during her illness. The nurses who stayed late, the neighbors who brought food, the people who simply offered a smile during the hardest days. Small acts of human decency that made unbearable times slightly more bearable. 3:20 p.m. The decision had to be made now. Jerome stepped out of the doorway and into the storm. The interview could wait. This woman needed help, and he was the only person in position to provide it. As his feet crunched through the rapidly deepening snow, Jerome felt a strange sense of peace. He was about to sacrifice his future for a stranger, but somehow it felt like the most natural thing in the world. He had no idea that this choice, this moment of pure moral clarity in the middle of a Detroit blizzard, would change both their lives forever. What Jerome discovered under the hood would reveal the first clue about this mysterious woman's true identity. Jerome approached the stranded Mercedes through the blinding snow, his tool bag heavy on his shoulder. The woman looked up as he drew near, and he could see the wariness in her eyes. A homeless-looking black man approaching her broken-down luxury car in the middle of a storm. He understood her hesitation. "Ma'am, I'm Jerome," he called out over the wind. "I can help with your car." She studied him carefully, taking in his worn but clean clothes, the professional tool bag, his respectful manner. Despite her obvious anxiety, something about his calm presence seemed to reassure her. "I'm Catherine," she replied, her voice shaking from the cold. "Do you really know about cars?" "Yes, ma'am. Automotive engineer." He didn't mention he'd been unemployed for months, that this storm was costing him his last shot at rebuilding his life. Jerome popped the hood and immediately assessed the problem. His trained eye spotted it right away. a combination of frozen fuel lines and alternator failure, the kind of problem that would take hours at a shop and cost hundreds of dollars. "How bad is it?" Catherine asked, shivering violently in her expensive coat. "Bad enough," Jerome said honestly, "but I can fix it." What happened next would haunt Catherine for the rest of her life. Jerome removed his only winter coat, a threadbare jacket that was still his sole protection against the freezing temperatures. Without hesitation, he spread it on the snowy ground beneath the car. "What are you doing?" Catherine asked, alarmed. "Making sure you don't get your dress dirty, ma'am." "I need to get underneath." Catherine watched in stunned silence as Jerome crawled under her car wearing nothing but a thin button-down shirt. The temperature was well below freezing, the ground soaked with icy slush, but he worked with steady focus. "Sir, you'll freeze to death under there." "I'll be fine," Jerome called back, though his breath was already visible in sharp puffs. "Just need to reroute these connections." His hands, already raw from the cold, began bleeding as he worked with the frozen metal parts. But Jerome didn't slow down. He pulled tools from his father's leather bag, each instrument precision-crafted and worth more than most people's monthly salary. That's when the real sacrifice began. "Ma'am, I need you to try starting it now," Jerome called out after 20 minutes of work. The engine turned over but died immediately. Jerome diagnosed the problem instantly. They needed a rare transmission component, something he'd have to improvise. His eyes fell on his father's vintage tool set, specifically a specialized gauge worth $200. Jerome held the tool in his bleeding hands, remembering his father teaching him to use it. "This belonged to your grandfather," his father had said, "and his father before him. Treat it with respect." But respect, Jerome realized, meant using tools to help people, not preserving them in a bag. He carefully removed the precision component from the gauge, knowing he was destroying an irreplaceable family heirloom. But Catherine needed to get out of this storm, and this was the only way. "You shouldn't be sacrificing your tools for me," Catherine said when she saw what he was doing. "My father always said tools are meant to help people, not sit in a box," Jerome replied, already installing the improvised part. Catherine pulled out her wallet. "Let me at least pay you for—" "Ma'am, you're shivering." "Here." Jerome unscrewed the cap from his water bottle, his only drink for the day, and handed it to her. "You need this more than I do." Catherine stared at the bottle, then at Jerome's bleeding hands, then at his thin shirt soaked through with melting snow. This man was giving her everything he had. While Jerome worked, Catherine made a phone call, speaking quietly into her phone. "I'll be late for the board meeting," she said. "No, don't send a car. It's complicated." The way she said board meeting caught Jerome's attention. Most people didn't have board meetings, but he was too focused on the repair work to think much about it. 45 minutes into the rescue, disaster struck. A city snowplow came barreling down the street, unable to see the Mercedes clearly through the storm. Jerome heard the approaching rumble and acted on pure instinct. "Get out of the car! Now!" He pulled Catherine away from the vehicle just as the plow's blade scraped past, missing them by inches. Jerome positioned himself between Catherine and the street, shielding her with his body as more cars swerved dangerously around them. "Stay behind me," he said firmly. "I won't let anything happen to you." Catherine looked up at this man who had just risked his life to protect hers, a complete stranger who had already given up his coat, his tools, his water, his time, and now nearly his life to help her. Back under the car, Jerome's improvised solution was working. His engineering background showed as he jury-rigged connections with the skill of someone who understood not just how to follow instructions, but how to solve problems creatively. Finally, the engine roared to life. Jerome crawled out from under the car, his shirt torn and dirty, his hands purple with cold and streaked with blood. But his face lit up with genuine satisfaction. The first time he'd felt professionally useful in months. "It should get you home safely," he said, beginning to pack his tools. Several were damaged beyond repair, and the gauge he'd cannibalized would never work again. His father's $3,000 tool set, passed down through generations, was now worth maybe half that. Catherine watched him fold his ruined coat and saw him wince as the frozen fabric cracked. She realized with growing horror what this man had sacrificed for her. His clothes, his tools, his health, his time. And for what? A stranger he'd never see again. "Jerome," she said softly, "you missed something important today, didn't you?" Jerome checked his watch, 4:47 p.m. The interview was long over. His last, best chance at employment had vanished while he lay in the snow fixing a stranger's car. "Just a job interview," he said with a tired smile. "Nothing that can't wait." But they both knew it could wait forever now. As Catherine sat in her warm, running car, she watched Jerome gather his damaged tools with careful dignity. He moved slowly, obviously exhausted and hypothermic, but he still treated each instrument with respect. The contrast was overwhelming. She was warm, safe, and about to drive home to comfort and security. He was walking away into a blizzard with nowhere to go, having sacrificed everything to help her. Jerome Washington had just demonstrated something Catherine thought no longer existed in the world: pure, selfless kindness with absolutely no expectation of reward. She had no idea how profoundly that would change both their lives. But when Catherine reached for her purse, Jerome's response revealed the character trait that would soon change everything. Catherine sat in her warm car, watching Jerome pack his damaged tools with shaking hands. His lips had turned blue, his shirt was soaked through, and blood from his cuts had frozen on the metal. She'd never witnessed such selfless sacrifice. "Jerome, how much do I owe you?" she asked, pulling out her wallet. "That was incredible work." Jerome glimpsed the wallet's contents: platinum credit cards, thick cash, and something else that made Catherine quickly close it. Some kind of official card with an embossed logo. "Nothing, ma'am," Jerome said simply. "Just glad you're safe." "But you used parts from your own tools," Catherine insisted. "You sacrificed valuable equipment. Let me at least—" "My father always said tools are meant to be used to help people. That's enough payment." Jerome didn't mention that he'd just destroyed $200 worth of irreplaceable parts, or that he'd missed his final job interview. He didn't mention having no money for food, no warm coat for the night ahead, and no prospects for changing any of that. Catherine realized she was witnessing something extraordinary. In her world, everything had a price. Every favor came with expectations. But this man had given everything and wanted nothing in return. "Jerome, please, you're hypothermic. Let me pay for a hotel room dash. That's very kind, ma'am, but I'll be fine." The refusal wasn't pride, Catherine realized. It was a genuine belief in helping without expectation of reward. She'd encountered something her corporate world rarely showed her: authentic kindness without agenda. "Then let me give you something," Catherine said, reaching into her briefcase. She started to pull out a business card, then thought better of it. Instead, she removed a small gold keychain from her keys, an intricate emblem that clearly meant something important. "This is from my workplace," she said carefully. "If you ever need anything, really anything, show this to the security guard at Renaissance Center, 42nd floor. Tell them Catherine sent you." Jerome accepted the keychain politely, having no idea what Renaissance Center was or why the 42nd floor might matter. The emblem was beautifully crafted, expensive looking, but he assumed it was just a grateful gesture. "What's your last name, Jerome?" "Washington, ma'am." "Jerome Washington." Catherine repeated the name softly, memorizing it. "You're a good man, Jerome Washington. The world needs more people like you." Something in her voice suggested this encounter meant more than just getting her car fixed. But Jerome was too cold and tired to analyze it deeply. "Thank you for letting me help," Jerome said. "I hope you get home safe." As Jerome walked away into the storm, Catherine watched him disappear into the swirling snow. The contrast was heartbreaking. She sat in luxury and warmth, about to drive to a comfortable home. He was walking into a blizzard with nowhere to go, having sacrificed his livelihood for her welfare. Jerome carefully pocketed Catherine's keychain alongside his other treasures, a photo of his parents, his engineering graduation pin, and a recommendation letter from his last job. These items represented who he was and who he still believed himself to be, despite his circumstances. Walking through the deepening snow, Jerome felt an odd sense of peace. Yes, he'd missed his interview. Yes, he'd damaged his tools. Yes, he had no coat and nowhere warm to sleep. But he'd helped someone who needed it, and that felt right in a way that transcended practical concerns. Behind him, Catherine sat motionless in her car for several minutes, watching Jerome's figure disappear. She pulled out her phone and made a call. "Emily?" "It's Catherine. I need you to look into someone for me. Jerome Washington, automotive engineer. Find out everything you can about his background, his employment history, his current situation. This is priority one." The woman who had just been saved was about to become the one doing the saving. Jerome had no idea that his simple act of kindness had just set in motion events that would transform both their lives forever. What Jerome didn't know was that his act of kindness was about to push him to the very edge of survival. That night, Jerome returned to the warehouse shivering uncontrollably. 45 minutes working in sub-zero temperatures wearing only a thin shirt had done serious damage. His core body temperature had dropped dangerously low, and now his body was fighting back with violent chills that wouldn't stop. By midnight, Jerome's fever spiked to 102 degrees. His hands, cut and frostbitten from the metalwork, had swollen to twice their normal size. Every breath brought sharp pain to his chest, the beginning signs of pneumonia. "Just need to sleep it off," Jerome whispered to himself, wrapping his damaged coat around his shaking body. But sleep wouldn't come. The fever brought hallucinations. He saw his mother, his father, faces of people he'd helped over the years. Day one brought the first crisis. The warehouse owner, Mr. Peterson, arrived for his weekly check and found Jerome burning with fever, coughing violently. "You're sick," Peterson said, backing away. "You'll infect the other people who shelter here. You need to leave." "Please, Mr. Peterson," Jerome pleaded, his voice barely a whisper. "Just one more night. I have nowhere else. I'm sorry, Jerome. I can't risk it." Into the storm Jerome went, carrying his tool bag and little else. The temperature had dropped to 5 below zero and he had no coat, just the torn shirt from yesterday's rescue mission. Day two brought desperation. Jerome's fever climbed to 104 degrees. He sought shelter in the train station, but security ejected him at 3 a.m. "No loitering," they said, not caring that he was clearly ill. Jerome collapsed on a park bench, his body convulsing with chills. Snow accumulated on his motionless form as he drifted in and out of consciousness. A passerby thought he was drunk and called the police, who moved him along without checking his condition. His phone died that morning. Jerome sold it to a pawn shop for $25, enough for basic cold medicine and a small meal. His first food in 36 hours. Day 3 brought the lowest point. Jerome's tool bag, damaged by the storm and his constant movement, lost more components. The leather was cracking, tools falling out. He tried to take a repair job, but his hands shook too violently to work properly. "Are you drunk?" the customer asked, watching Jerome fumble with a simple wrench. "No, sir, just under the weather. Find me when you're sober." Jerome sat in the public library, staring at Catherine's golden keychain. It represented hope, but also shame. Using it would mean admitting he'd helped her for personal gain, wouldn't it? He pulled out a piece of scrap paper and wrote, "Dear Ms. Catherine, thank you for letting me help you. I hope you got home safe. Your kindness means everything. Jerome Washington. He couldn't afford a stamp to mail it. Day 4 brought the moment of truth. Jerome woke on a park bench covered in fresh snow, his lips blue, his breathing shallow. A jogger stopped and checked his pulse. "Sir? Sir, are you okay? Should I call an ambulance?" Jerome tried to speak but only managed a weak cough. He was dying and he knew it. The jogger's voice seemed to come from far away. "I'm calling 911. "No," Jerome managed to whisper. "No hospitals. Can't afford." As the jogger hesitated, Jerome made his decision. He pulled out Catherine's keychain with trembling fingers. "Renaissance Center," he whispered. "I need Renaissance Center." Jerome realized he had two choices: die with his pride intact, or swallow that pride and ask for help. His father's voice echoed in his memory. "Son, sometimes accepting help takes more courage than giving it." Jerome struggled to his feet, every step an act of will. Renaissance Center was 12 blocks away. In his condition, it might as well have been 12 miles. But Jerome Washington had never quit anything in his life. He wasn't about to start now. Each step toward the Renaissance Center was a step toward salvation, or surrender. What Jerome didn't realize was that Catherine's phone calls that evening would set in motion events beyond his wildest imagination. That evening, before his health crisis began, Jerome examined Catherine's keychain by flashlight in the warehouse. The gold-plated emblem featured an intricate logo he didn't recognize, letters intertwined with a building design. Quality craftsmanship, expensive work. What kind of workplace gave out such valuable tokens? The keychain felt substantial, clearly custom-made. Whatever Catherine's job was, her employer had serious money. Meanwhile, Catherine arrived at Renaissance Center, Detroit's most prestigious office building. The security guard immediately straightened when he saw her. "Good evening, Miss Morrison. Working late again?" "Something like that, Frank," Catherine replied, her mind elsewhere. She couldn't stop thinking about Jerome walking into that storm. Catherine's corner office occupied the entire northwest corner of the 42nd floor. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered panoramic city views, but tonight she saw only swirling snow. Somewhere out there, a good man was struggling because he'd helped her. Her desk displayed success symbols, photos with politicians, ribbon-cutting ceremonies, conference speaking engagements. One photo showed her at a podium with a banner reading, "Morrison Foundation, Building Communities Through Opportunity." Catherine opened her laptop and typed, "Jerome Washington, Automotive Engineer, Detroit." His LinkedIn appeared, last updated months ago, showing impressive credentials from Michigan State and 5 years at Ford. The employment gap was obvious, but qualifications were solid. She called her assistant. "Emily, I need you to research someone. Jerome Washington, Automotive Engineer. Complete employment history, education, current situation. Discreetly." Should I prioritize this? Make it your only priority tonight. Catherine reviewed documents across her desk, mission statements, funding proposals, evaluation criteria. The Morrison Foundation's goal was identifying and empowering individuals who demonstrate exceptional character in challenging circumstances. For 2 years, her team had searched for the right person to lead their most ambitious project. They'd interviewed hundreds, tested countless scenarios, and spent millions. They needed someone with technical skills, yes, but more importantly, unshakable moral character. Catherine stared at the storm, remembering Jerome's words. "My father always said tools are meant to be used to help people." She opened the foundation files and drafted a new folder. Jerome Washington, Priority Candidate. Jerome had no idea that while he prepared for another night searching for shelter, someone was already searching for him. The next morning, Jerome had no idea that the most powerful person in Detroit's business community was about to walk back into his life. While Jerome fought for survival over 4 brutal days, Catherine Morrison couldn't sleep, couldn't focus, couldn't stop thinking about the man who'd sacrificed everything to help her. Day 1. Catherine canceled all meetings and drove to their intersection. She asked every business owner, every person she could find. "Have you seen Jerome Washington?" Tall, black man, automotive engineer. Nothing. Homeless people don't leave forwarding addresses. Day 2. Catherine hired Detroit's best private investigator, but tracking someone with no address, no phone, no digital footprint was nearly impossible. "He's like a ghost, Miss Morrison," the investigator reported. Catherine visited every shelter, every soup kitchen. "Jerome?"
"Yes, we know him," said a Sacred Heart volunteer, "but we haven't seen him since the storm." Day 3. Catherine placed ads in newspapers and radio, looking for Jerome Washington. Substantial reward. Dozens of calls, but every lead was false. "Maybe he left the city," her assistant suggested. "No," Catherine said. "He's here. And he's in trouble." Day 4, 10:30 a.m. Catherine's phone rang while she drove through downtown. "Miss Morrison, this is Frank from security. Someone's here with your keychain." Catherine's heart stopped. "My keychain?" "The gold Morrison logo one, but this man looks very sick." "I'm coming right now." Catherine abandoned her car and ran 3 blocks to Renaissance Center. What she saw nearly broke her heart. Jerome sat slumped in a visitor's chair, barely conscious. His face was gaunt, lips cracked. His clean shirt was now torn and dirty. Tools scattered on the floor where his shaking hands had dropped them. "Jerome!" Catherine rushed to his side.
Jerome looked up with fever-glazed eyes. "Catherine, are you real?" "I'm real. I'm here." She knelt beside him, shocked by his condition. Jerome tried to stand but stumbled. Catherine caught him, feeling his fever. "I'm sorry," Jerome whispered. "I didn't want to bother you." "Bother me? Jerome, I've been looking for you for 4 days. You were looking for me? I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about you walking into that storm." Tears streamed down Catherine's face, seeing what he'd endured. "Jerome, I need to tell you something. My name is Catherine Morrison." Jerome nodded weakly, the name meaningless in his fevered state. "I'm the CEO of Morrison Industries. We own this building. 43 companies across the Midwest." Jerome stared, trying to process this through his illness. "You mean you're important?" Catherine laughed through her tears. "Jerome, you had no idea who I was, and you still gave everything to help me." She looked around the luxury lobby, then at Jerome's condition. "You sacrificed your interview, your tools, your health, for a stranger. That's not just kindness. That's the rarest thing in the world." "I just fixed your car," Jerome said weakly. "No, you did something more important. You showed me that character isn't about what you have. It's about what you give when you have nothing left." Catherine called security. "Get Dr. Peterson here immediately. Prepare the executive medical suite. Jerome, when you're feeling better, I have something to offer you, something that will change not just your life, but thousands of other lives." Jerome leaned against her, exhausted. "Why?" "Because 4 days ago you proved some people are worth moving heaven and earth for, and I've been moving heaven and earth to find you ever since." The twist was complete. The homeless man she'd desperately searched for was the same man whose character she'd been seeking for years. What Catherine was about to offer Jerome would not only transform his life, but create a ripple effect that would touch thousands of lives across Detroit. 2 days later, Jerome sat in Morrison Industries' executive medical suite, his fever finally broken, his strength slowly returning. Dr. Peterson had diagnosed severe pneumonia, dehydration, and hypothermia. "Another day without treatment," the doctor told Catherine privately, "and we might have lost him." Now, as Jerome looked out at the panoramic view of Detroit from the 42nd floor,
Catherine entered carrying a presentation folder. Jerome, are you feeling well enough to talk about your future? Jerome turned from the window, still amazed to be in this place. Ma'am, I'm grateful for the medical care, but I should probably... Jerome, what I'm about to show you represents 2 years of planning. We've been waiting for the right person. Catherine opened her laptop to a presentation titled, The Morrison Community Innovation Initiative. Jerome, we want to offer you 3 things. First, a position as Chief Community Engineering Officer for Morrison Industries. Starting salary, $120,000 annually, with full benefits and housing assistance. Jerome's eyes widened. It was more money than he'd ever imagined earning. Second, a $500,000 personal grant from the Morrison Foundation to help you rebuild your life completely. Pay off debts, establish housing, whatever you need for a fresh start. Jerome stared at the numbers on the screen, unable to process such wealth. But third, and most importantly, we're creating an entirely new division, and we want you to run it. Catherine clicked to the next slide. The Street Angels Project, $10 million initiative. Based on your engineering background and your demonstrated ability to see solutions where others see problems, you would oversee mobile assistance units. Essentially workshops on wheels that provide immediate help while identifying individuals with hidden talents. The presentation showed detailed concept drawings, converted vehicles equipped with tools, computers, shower facilities, and job placement resources. Instead of traditional charity that creates dependency, this program identifies people's existing strengths and amplifies them. Just like what happened to you. Jerome leaned forward, studying the plans. You want to find more people like me? Not just find them, Jerome. Develop them. You would build a team of formerly homeless individuals who become certified counselors, job coaches, and advocates. People who understand reality, not just theory. Catherine showed statistics. Our research indicates 23% of Detroit's homeless population has college degrees. 31% have skilled trade experience. These aren't people who lack ability, they lack opportunity. Within 1 year, we project serving 2,000 individuals directly. But the real goal is identifying 100 people like you. Skilled professionals who've experienced setbacks but retain incredible value. Jerome felt overwhelmed. Ma'am, this is huge. You really want me to run something this big? Jerome, 4 days ago you diagnosed and fixed a complex automotive problem in a blizzard using improvised tools. Today you're sitting in a corporate boardroom understanding systems and solutions. You're not just smart. You're adaptable, resourceful, and most importantly, you have credibility with the community we're trying to serve. Catherine showed the expansion plans. Detroit would be the pilot program, but our ultimate goal is creating Street Angels projects in 20 cities. You would oversee the entire national rollout. Maps appeared showing potential impact. Thousands of lives transformed, families reunited, communities strengthened. You wouldn't be doing this alone. Morrison Industries has partnerships with major corporations, universities, and government agencies. You'd have full access to our executive team, business coaches, and implementation specialists. Jerome studied the organizational charts, the budget projections, the timeline for expansion. What would you expect from me? Complete executive training, establish residence, and demonstrate consistent leadership. But Jerome, based on what you showed me 4 days ago, I believe you're ready for this challenge. If you accept, we start immediately. Tomorrow, you move into corporate housing. Next week, you begin executive orientation. Within 30 days, you're leading your first pilot team. Within 6 months, the full Street Angels project launches. Jerome felt the weight of the opportunity. I need to ask, why me? Really, why me? Catherine's response captured everything. Jerome, in my 20 years of business, I've learned that technical skills can be taught, but character cannot.
4 days ago, you had every reason to walk away, but you chose to help anyway. That's not just kindness, that's leadership. There's one more thing. Catherine's voice softened. Your father's tools, the ones you used parts from to help me. We're commissioning a master craftsman to restore them completely. And we're creating the Jerome Washington Memorial Tool Library as part of each Street Angels unit, where people can borrow professional-grade tools for training and emergency repairs. Jerome's eyes filled with tears at this unexpected honor to his father's memory. So, Jerome Washington, Catherine concluded, are you ready to change not just your life, but to help us change how America thinks about homelessness and human potential? Jerome looked out at the city below, the same streets where he'd been homeless just days ago. Now he was being offered the chance to help others find their way off those streets. Ms. Morrison, Jerome said quietly, 4 days ago I thought my life was over. You're offering me the chance to help save other lives. He turned back to face her. When do we start? What happened over the next 6 months exceeded everyone's expectations, including Jerome's. Month 1. The transformation. Jerome moved into a downtown apartment, his first real home in nearly a year. The contrast was stunning, from sleeping on cardboard to Egyptian cotton sheets, from washing in public restrooms to a marble bathroom, from wearing torn clothes to tailored business suits. But Jerome insisted on keeping his father's restored tool set in his office as a reminder of where he came from. Corporate training challenged him in new ways. Board meetings, budget presentations, media interviews. Jerome absorbed it all with the same focused intensity he'd once applied to automotive engineering. Month 2. Street Angels launch. The first mobile unit hit Detroit's streets. Jerome, now polished but still approachable, led a team including 3 formerly homeless individuals who'd become certified peer counselors. The van was equipped with everything needed: tools, computers, shower facilities, hot meals, and most importantly, hope. Jerome's first success story came within days. Sarah Martinez, a former teacher living in her car after a divorce, was identified through the program. Within 2 weeks, she was placed in an emergency teaching position and received housing assistance. Month 3. Media recognition. The Detroit Free Press ran a front-page feature. From homeless to hope giver, local man's story inspires revolutionary program. The article included before and after photos of Jerome and interviews with people he'd helped. Jerome appeared on local TV news, speaking eloquently about seeing potential where others see problems. His corporate training showed he was comfortable with cameras, articulate about policy, passionate about results. Month 4. Expanding impact. The Street Angels project was serving 200 people monthly. More success stories emerged. Robert Brooks, a skilled electrician who lost everything to medical debt, was connected with union training and back on his feet within a month. Maria Rodriguez, a single mother with accounting skills, received childcare support and job placement at a Morrison subsidiary. Each success story generated media attention, community support, and additional funding. Month 5. National recognition. Morrison Industries won a national award for innovative community development. Jerome accepted the award alongside Catherine, representing a partnership between corporate resources and grassroots understanding. Standing at the podium in a $2,000 suit, Jerome remembered sleeping in the warehouse just months earlier. 6 months ago, I was the problem everyone wanted to solve, he told the audience. Today, I'm proof that people don't need to be saved. They need to be seen. Month 6. The numbers. Statistics flashed across news screens nationwide. 347 individuals directly served 89 people placed in permanent housing, 156 connected to employment or training, 23 small businesses launched with microloans, $2.3 million in economic impact to local communities. But the real measure of success wasn't in numbers. It was in Transformed Lives. The program expands maps showed Street Angels projects launching in Chicago, Cleveland, and Milwaukee. Jerome now oversaw regional directors, all of whom had personal experience with homelessness. The warehouse where Jerome once slept was converted into the Street Angels Resource Center, offering job training, shower facilities, and temporary housing. A plaque by the door read, "In memory of all who slept here, in hope of all who won't have to." Personal growth. Jerome's apartment is filled with new memories. Photos with his Street Angels team, moments with people he'd helped, awards and recognition. He learned to cook, joined a gym, and started dating someone he met through volunteer work. But he never forgot the lessons of the street. Every morning, Jerome spent an hour walking through downtown Detroit, not as CEO now, but as someone who remembered what it felt like to be invisible. Unexpected connections. Jerome reconnected with his engineering background, consulting on adaptive technology projects for people with disabilities. His technical skills, combined with his social mission, created innovative solutions nobody else could envision. Catherine's reflection. In a business magazine interview, Catherine said, "Jerome exceeded every metric we established. But more importantly, he reminded us that the most sophisticated business solution is often the simplest human one. See people's potential, provide opportunity, get out of the way." The ripple effect continued expanding, touching lives across the country. Jerome's act of kindness in a Detroit blizzard had become a national movement, proving that sometimes the smallest gestures create the biggest changes. 1 year later, Jerome discovered that the most important change wasn't in his circumstances, but in his understanding of what home really means. Exactly 1 year after the blizzard, Jerome stood in his corner office at the Morrison Foundation. Snow fell outside, but this time he watched from warmth and security. On his desk sat his father's restored tool set and a framed photo from that day, Catherine's car in the storm, Jerome working in the blizzard. Today marked the launch of Blizzard Day, an annual Street Angels tradition where teams specifically reached out during severe weather, remembering that a crisis often creates the greatest opportunities for connection. Jerome had learned that his months of homelessness, while difficult, gave him insights no business school could provide. He understood systemic problems from the inside, spoke with authentic authority, and connected with people others might overlook. A knock at his office door interrupted his reflection. His assistant announced, "There's a young woman downstairs who says her car broke down in the snow. She asked specifically for you." Jerome smiled, grabbed his coat and father's tool set, still kept ready for exactly this kind of moment. Outside in the storm, a young black woman stood beside a broken-down Honda, shivering in the cold. She was clearly struggling financially. Worn clothes, anxiety in her eyes, the look Jerome recognized from his own recent past. "Are you Jerome Washington?" I heard you help people." "Yes, I do." "What's your name?" "Alicia. Alicia Thomas. I just graduated from engineering school, but I can't afford to fix my car, and I have a job interview across town in an hour." Jerome opened his toolkit, the same one his father carried, the same one he used to help Catherine. But now he saw the deeper pattern. Kindness doesn't end with one act, it creates an endless cycle. "Let's take a look, Alicia. And don't worry about the interview time. I might be able to help with that too." As he worked on her car, Jerome explained about the Street Angels project, about opportunities for young engineers, about how sometimes what looks like the worst day can become the best day of your life. The snow continued to fall as Jerome fixed Alicia's car, just as someone once fixed his life. The cycle of kindness continued, multiplying one person at a time. Jerome's story reminds us that extraordinary change can begin with ordinary kindness. In a world that often feels divided, we can choose to see potential instead of problems, to offer help instead of judgment. Every day, people around you face invisible struggles. That person asking for directions might be homeless. The colleague who seems distant might be facing impossible choices. The stranger whose car broke down might be on their way to the opportunity that changes everything. Jerome's journey from sleeping in an abandoned warehouse to leading a national movement started with one simple choice: help someone who needed it. What if your next act of kindness is someone's turning point? What if the person you help today becomes tomorrow's leader? Be someone's Jerome. You never know whose life you might change, including your own. If this story moved you, please share it. Like this video, subscribe for more stories of everyday heroes, and remember, kindness is always the right choice. What's your Jerome moment? Tell us in the comments below.